Hi guys, I'm Andrew Henderson from Nomad Capitalist in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. Wanted to make a little short video for you on banking in Mongolia. Now, I often start off videos by saying that a number of people have asked me this question, or a lot of people have asked me to make a video on this topic. In this case, I can't recall a single person who asked to learn about banking in Mongolia, but it's been the subject of a lot of discussions on internet forums and various places online over the last few years, largely to do with high interest rates. And so I wanted to kind of give you a report. In fact, I spent a good part of my time here spending time at banks, researching banks, and talking about banks. Basically, I spent time at Mongolian banks, sandwiched in between recovering from jet lag and recovering from food poisoning. Top 5 restaurant on Mongolia. It was not. But this is the debit card that I got from the bank that I determined to be the best bank in Mongolia. It's called TDB Bank. And I wrote an article about this at nomadcapitalist.com called How to Open a Bank Account in Mongolia. And talked to some lawyers, talked to some friends, talked to some various people. And the consensus is that banks here are really not all that well run. That despite the 15 and 16% interest rates that they're offering on one-year term deposits, that those high interest rates are not just because of a lack of capital in the country and a need to raise capital, but also because the banks just are poorly run, and that this is a little bit different situation than, for example, a Georgia or other countries. And it's perhaps somewhere in between Georgia, which is relatively well run, in Ukraine, which is run by the mafia largely, at least the banks. Many of them are. So, what did I learn? I learned that the account opening process here in Mongolia, not quite as easy as I would have expected, not quite as open as I would have expected. I'm not saying it's not open. The first challenge that you have here is the lack of general knowledge of English. Most people just don't speak it. You would think Russian might work a little bit. It didn't. I don't speak Chinese to know if it works, but I don't believe it does. So in general, there's a language barrier here, and that's one of the reasons why when the top 5 countries that visit here, I think number 5 is the United States. Like 14,000 Americans visited Mongolia in the last year, and that'd be the number 5, 14,000. So it's a very insulated place. There's not like even in Georgia, where most Westerners haven't been. At least a lot of Polish people go there. At least Russians go there. At least they're familiar with other people. Here, it's very insulated. And so just finding someone to speak English, even at the banks, even at the main branches of some of the banks, proved to be a little bit more difficult than I would have expected. And when you got in there, the English wasn't quite as good as I would have hoped. Take, for example, this debit card. It's a domestic debit card. And when I fly out of Mongolia today, it is no longer useful. In fact, it wasn't useful at one of the stores I went to earlier this week here in Mongolia, although that may have been the store's fault, not the bank's. So, the fact that they didn't understand I wanted an international card rather than a domestic card was an issue. That was the biggest challenge for me, was just finding people to really understand what you're trying to do. Now, I was able to go back and set up something a little bit different, but I didn't really want to go through the difficulty and go through the return visit of coming back and picking up another card. I have plenty of cards, and so my experiment kind of came to a premature end, even though I was able to set up another account to just say, okay, I'll take this blue debit card that can only be used in Mongolia and can only be used in Mongolian tours. So, can you get high interest rates in Mongolia? Absolutely yes. I talked about that in my article on Nomad Capitalist. 15, 16% in local currency, 5, 6, 7% in US dollars. Not bad. Would I necessarily do it? I am not rushing to do it. Quite frankly, I think that for most of you who aren't looking to just geek out on bank accounts, there are better places and easier to get to places and less frustrating places. But also, it's just, the local currency. This is an economy that has gone from 17, 18% growth rates to, hopefully it's growing this year. And that's just in the course of a couple of years. And so what's going to happen to the economy? Some think it'll come back, but right now it's not looking nearly as good as it once was. And the currency already fell from 1,400 to the dollar to 2,400 to the dollar. Back when everyone was starting to talk about it, they said, how can you really lose any money in the Tugrik? Just put money in there at 15%. Even if the currency goes down somewhat, who cares? You'll, get 15%, right? Well, I talked about that in a Georgian bank account last year. In another article I wrote for Nomad Capitalist. And the currency did go down, and I think that the Georgian lari went down since I opened that account, maybe 6 or 7%. I'm making 11%. Here, the currency went down 40%, and it would take you a couple years just to get back to even. So, playing the game of let's try and catch a falling knife never really works, and will the currency go down even more? I'm not convinced that it will. I'm not a Mongolian Tugrik expert, nor did I endeavor to be, but I imagine that it's something to be careful of, that putting a bunch of your money in a currency in an economy that's no longer as hot as it once was and has already dropped is maybe the best idea for the average person. So my opinion on Mongolian banks is largely taking the word of Mongolians. They're disorganized, they're poorly run. My personal experience is limited English, and I went to the best bank according to many folks here, TDB, and I'm not complaining about the experience, but I can't say I would recommend it to everyone as their new banking haven. So if you want to find out more about banks around the world, you go to nomadcapitalist.com and subscribe to our channel here on YouTube.